And it is Monday morning, the 1st of August, and we are entrenched in the cycle of the sun, Leo time, which is always an invigorating part of our yearly travail around the sun. It's, giving us that opportunity to put our attention on that source of light that propels everything in this material world, which is, of course, paralleled by the true source of life, which propels everything in the spiritual realm. How are you this morning, Stephen?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm also looking forward to Mars exiting Scorpio, which I think happens tomorrow. But that one, I think, is something we've all been feeling. So that should be good for everyone.
Yes, and we've got all kinds of planetary aspects going on, which, if you want to try to understand this material realm, that gives you a little bit of insight. But the reality is, in order to participate in this realm of consciousness, you pretty much have to be off your frickin' rocker right off the bat. So trying to sort it out and make sense of it is I think, a journey that we all take until we finally arrive at that point where we realize you can't make sense of it, because it's like trying to have a discussion with a plate of spaghetti. It just, it's not going to work. But we do have a different realm that we move and breathe and have our being in, which is the realm of the divine, the realm of the omnipotent. And once we recognize that this realm can't be fixed, then that is inspiration for us to shift our consciousness and our identity to that much higher realm, where things really are always in a state of perfection.
Yeah, now that's sort of a wild idea from the perspective of the world, because in the world we have wars going on, we have crazy elections, we have public issues on guns, Black Lives Matter, all these different ideas that create a lot of upheaval, a lot of chaos. And so when we hear the idea, well, everything in the divine is constantly in a state of perfection, then that does sort of bring about a knee-jerk reaction sometimes from the perspective of the world.
It pretty much is guaranteed,
right,
to make you very, very unpopular if you go around bad things like heart. Anyway, that kind of segues into this whole thing that our latest endeavor here is of A Course in Miracles. And, it all ties in beautifully to the first 7 lessons, and actually even beyond that, as far as creating a definitive understanding. And to look at Finkel. So you were going to look at action, Stephen. So what do you have to share?
I'm sorry, the screen was breaking up a little bit on your end. I don't know if it was you or me, but anyway, if I'm still audible, the introduction says that the purpose of the workbook is to train the mind to a different perception of everything in the world. And I don't know about you, Chris, but when I started doing the workbook lessons, I just really felt like each lesson was a way of sort of questioning everything that we perceive in the world, things that we might take as being literal, like as factual, as being things that we would just believe in without any sort of questioning, without any sort of basis for their reality. And so each workbook lesson, I found, goes about sort of dismantling our perception of this worldly reality in a different way. And it really builds on itself in a cumulative kind of way, which is really interesting to watch.
That's very true. And things that I always encourage people who are just getting into A Course in Miracles is it is important to read the text, but I think in order to really grasp everything that's in the text, at some point you need to make that commitment to doing the daily lessons, because number one, it in what you're trying to accomplish, and number two, it trains you to be mindful. And this is one of the greatest issues that modern society has. We have a culture, global culture, that is based on just allowing the mind to go unfettered and undirected and even unobserved. And so even though there is a beginning of recognition that we do have to train the mind, it is not becoming like by any means. But that's the beauty of A Course in Miracles, is it does help us train the mind, give it form, give it direction, and to be able to step back and realize that I have a mind, but I am not that mind. In other words, that's merely one component of who I truly am. And once we begin to take on that challenge, it is a huge step in rectifying a lot of dysfunctional parts of our lifestyle and a lot of dysfunctional aspects of our day-to-day existence. So it's not just about A Course in Miracles. It is a much, much broader platform that we're approaching by doing the lessons, because it is a series of lessons in mind training.
Yeah, it's interesting how the very first lesson in the workbook comes out with what I would consider the foundation for the entire workbook, which is nothing I see means anything. And so we're going to go through the first 7 lessons, and we'll go through 7 lessons each weekly hangout that we have as we agreed upon. So that way we have sort of like a weekly plan for all of us to review. And that first lesson, nothing I see means anything, is sort of like that core foundation for the workbook, and that it's saying the first lesson is telling us, oh, this table doesn't mean anything, this chair doesn't mean anything. So we're practicing having this sort of outlook towards the objects in the room in which we're in, where we're saying it doesn't mean anything. And the purpose that I found in that is to recognize the core principle of A Course in Miracles, saying we live in a dream world. That's what the world is. It's coded with perception. That the reason for its existence is because it's coming from the mind of the dreamer. And when we start to say this doesn't mean anything, this chair doesn't mean anything, this bed doesn't mean anything, then we're really accustoming ourselves to seeing that this was an invented world from the mind of the dreamer.
That is true. And within that also is that realization that we have surrounded ourselves with objects and experiences that can mean something else entirely. And it's simply because we have created these attributions to all of the things around us that we're not able to really see them in any other light. So this is the beginning of clearing our prejudices, clearing all of our preconceived ideas about what things have to be and the way that they have to function within the realm of our life.
Mm. And would you also say, Chris, that just by introducing these ideas into your consciousness, into your field of awareness, you will start to notice a loosening effect of your mind? And I found from doing these workbook lessons that by loosening up the mind and providing the workbook as a foundation for my mind, that an energetic space has been opening up in myself.
That's very true. It absolutely works that way. The initial response I found with a lot of people, as well as myself, I'm sure you have, just when you first started doing these lessons, you go through different levels of feeling, you know, for a period of time like you're in free fall. You feel like everything, your reality is to be all under that solid table that you were placing all of your beliefs on. So it does have an effect that can cause you, you know, to actually feel disoriented for a few days. And so you do have to be willing to look at that and become comfortable with the fact that you are disassembling your reality. And it is going to create kind of a shaky cycle that you have to step into.
Mm. Yeah, and so how have you been able to address, if I'm wondering if people have come to you and wondered, well, I feel very ungrounded practicing the course's lessons or whatnot. I mean, what would your response be if someone was saying that they felt ungrounded by practicing these lessons?
Right, and my response is that, well, when you get into a boat, when you're standing on dry land and then you get into a boat to take a journey across the lake, you do have that initial feeling of discomfort. The boat's a little bit slippery, you're feeling, you know, that that different state of normalcy. So it's that experiencing and allowing. You just have to give yourself an allowing for that. And then once you start to row the boat, you actually develop a whole different level of comfort. But there is that initial, you know, few hours or few days of discomfort when the boat is wobbly and you're, you know, stumbling around trying to get your seat.
Mm-hmm. And so are we sailing from the old world into the real world, is what the Course describes?
That absolutely would be a perfect analogy, because we are setting off on a journey, and, you know, every river is destined to ultimately find an ocean or the ocean. And the old Sufi saying is that the ocean refuses no river. So, you know, it is a journey. It is, that's a very positive metaphor for A Course in Miracles. It's a journey down a river. The river is your life. And ultimately, the recognition is that the destiny is to have this outflowing, this release into this great ocean of love, divinity, truth, whatever, however you want to format it in the moment. But it is definitely a journey that is worth initiating, because it's the only journey in your life that will have any meaning.
Mm. And so I wanted to cut in and go to the next few lessons after lesson 1. So like lesson 2, for instance, says, I have given everything I see in this room all the meaning that it has for me. Lesson 3 says, I do not understand anything I see in this room. And then lesson 4 starts to talk about our thoughts. These thoughts do not mean anything. They are like the things I see in this room. And so just, I think just going from those lessons, we're seeing more and more dismantling. We're seeing more and more a loosening of the association that we have with things in this world. And then seeing in lesson 4 how it's saying it's actually your thoughts. Your thoughts are the ones that are tainting or biasing or making your perception of everything that we see around us.
That's very true. And for people like me, you know, I grew up in ranch country in the 1950s and 60s, and living out in the middle of the boondocks and dealing with, you know, the day-to-day adventures that you encounter in that kind of lifestyle, you really have to expand your vision of the things that you are surrounded by. And all of a sudden, you know, seeing things without having them completely one specific use is a thing that helped immensely in my entrance into the course, because you often have to come down depot, because that's a 28-mile jaunt, and you know, by the time you get there the store is closed and yada yada yada. So you grab things that have a specific purpose in your surroundings that you normally have acceptance of, but then you use those things in entirely different ways to accomplish a specific goal. And so the ability to shift the meaning of things that we are surrounded by in life is a huge step in the direction of releasing this concrete state of mind where it has to be this way and there is no other way. So I think that's probably one of the first things that, if you haven't had that experience in life, you're going to run into a little bit of resistance initially, just looking at common things and recognizing, oh, I could use this for something entirely different.
Yeah, and it seems to open up the mind to this more creative usage for it, which seems to me to be the way the Holy Spirit works through me and works through people, is that creativity, like you think of artists and musicians and people who create really beautiful music, for instance. I mean, they're in touch with that some sort of essence, some sort of flow that's going through them, that's allowing them to have that creative ability.
Yeah, they can take a riff from somebody else's composition and reinterpret it and give it a whole level of creative expression. And I think that really is the truth of life in this material realm, is that in actual fact there is nothing new, you know, but the reinterpretation of the same old things from the most ancient of times is allowing us to see circumstances and objects through a different lens and coming to a whole different level of perception. And again, this is, you know, again, where we get into rhetorical weirdness, when we start looking at perception and realizing how biased our perceptions about everything around us actually is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that has a direct effect in the world that we see around us, of course. I want to cut into, as we're getting close to around the time we'd wrap up, probably another 10 minutes. I want to go over these next few lessons just briefly. It says, I am never upset for the reason I think, is lesson 5. And then lesson 6 is, I am upset because I see something that is not there. Lesson 7 says, I see only the past. So those three could really be like a doozy if you're not familiar with the course and the ideas that the course supports. Because lesson 5 is saying, I'm never upset for the reason I think. Well, that means that whenever I get upset, whenever I'm frustrated with something going on in my life, I'm not really upset at the circumstance itself. I'm upset because of a fundamental issue that exists within me, that I believe in the separation of God, that I believe that that's even a possible thing, is why I could ever possibly be upset. Was that accurate in your view, Chris?
It definitely is. A lot of times we have, all of our experiences are based on past events, and so we have preconceived notions as to the way things absolutely have to turn out. And when we start to encounter things without prejudice, when we are just open to the idea of moving through life and allowing life to unfold in a natural way, what happens is we end up creating or encountering situations that we are not prepared for. And it creates this discomfort, it creates this sense of being upset. But the truth is, as you had said, the actual core of all of this is we believe that we have actually managed to separate ourselves from our source, and that we are living in a state of individuality, which is a state of vulnerability and fear and, expectation of the worst possible outcome. So it definitely is it is the underlying fault that we project into all these different circumstances surrounding us.
Yeah, and the course says in the text, and I believe in the workbook lesson, I don't see it, but in the workbook lesson, I see only the past. The text mentions that this world really happened long ago, like this entire lifetime that we're living out is a distant memory that we're living out. It's something that we're clinging on to. It's something that happened as an idea, as a tiny mad idea. And because of the strength and power of the mind, we cling to that idea as if it's still playing out in front of us. But the reality is that it's already over, as if it never happened. That's useful for me because I'm able to see that what happens in front of me is like a script playing out. It is something that I'm watching from more of an observer standpoint, even though I appear to be here. I appear to be here engaged with life, doing the dishes or going to a movie or whatever it is, eating food, spending time with loved ones. All these things are appearing to happen, but I'm having this more of an observer mindset where I can see that this is a script that I'm playing out.
That's correct. And I don't think you even have to take it back to the idea of, this is ancient, because the reality is that in truth, we are always living either in a state of memory or in a state of anticipation. So we're always focused on the past or the future. And of course, we're omitting or failing to recognize that in the exact moment of now, that there is a release from both parts of this timeline. And there is the release from the past. There is a release from the future. And as you are able to come to that realization and let go or forgive the past, and that's really what forgiveness is all about, is simply the understanding that this was not real, it never really happened to begin with, then that alters the future. So that's really what all of our work is about, is to disengage from our addiction to the past and our anticipation of the future, and arrive at that moment of nowness, even if for a millisecond. If you can do this briefly throughout the day, you will discover that forgiving what has happened can lessen the impact of things that are coming up in the future. Then you see the practical nature of what we are talking about here. So the more we realize that we are seeing only the past, the more we realize that is very immediate. As soon as we stop and experience now, the past has been severed and we are no longer attached to it, or we are no longer victims of it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I feel like when I read that lesson 7, I see only the past, is the first thing I actually thought, from being a biology major and being this person who is into like science and the way things work, is I thought of the actual eyes they talk about in science don't even pick up what is out there right in front of us. There's a lag time on what we perceive in the world. So not only in a spiritual sense of it are things just occurring, in front of us from the past, but actually in a physical sense, if you look at it, there's a lag time between what's happening and what we perceive. And so I think that's trying to help us, that lesson is trying to help us see, to not invest so much trust in what we see in front of us.
Yes, absolutely. And that is why the Course reiterates in these first few lessons that we can't do a lot of cherry picking here. You can't say, well, I'll include this cup, but I'll omit something else. I mean, we have to, when we first start doing these lessons, they have to be without any prejudice. You have to look at every individual thing and recognize that the whole universe that you're experiencing is imprinted with your beliefs and imprinted with your expectations. To be willing to not shelter anything, not to hold anything back, not to put anything under the blanket. Because if you do that, those things are going to become stumbling blocks later. You really have to get to that point where you are ready to sacrifice everything. And, sacrifice is probably not a good word to use here, because throughout the Course we're told that sacrifice is not the point of this. But in this content, we can realize that we have to be willing to be honest about every single thing that we are surrounded, that we cherish.
Oh yeah. And I really find that it's a sobering process. Most times people are addicted to our thoughts, and so going through the course lessons is like, sobering our minds, sobering our perceptions, sobering everything, until we're left with that knowledge of God, which is that stillness. The part I wanted to mention, for example, is that you and I, Chris, have been astrologers. We've been interested, in helping people by using that tool of astrology, helping people to work through potential blockages by using the planets and using that great tool. Really is a great tool. But the Course even has had me, and I think you as well, challenge those preconceptions around looking at the planets for our meaning, like that, knowing that we have assigned the meaning to all of those things as well.
That really is reality, in that when we're looking at an astrology chart, if you are looking at it with an open vision, you will come to recognize that this is not exterior phenomenon happening that is forcing you to have the experiences that you're having in life. When we broaden our vision and realize all of the planets, all of the stars, all of the universes scattered throughout eternity actually are within me, then you begin to recognize that there is a dance going on here that I have scripted for my own awakening, even though I am perhaps not able to comprehend that in its fullest context. The truth is that when we start looking to astrology, if your astrologer or if your tarot card reader or if your counselor or whatever is telling you that exterior forces are having an effect on you, then you really need to step back from that counselor and begin to claim your source of power, which is that recognition that I am not a victim of an exterior force. I am the director of my own movie, and I have to be willing to take responsibility for that.
Right, which oftentimes means challenging those crutches that we place under our arms, saying we needed crutches, but the truth was that we didn't really need those crutches, like that those crutches were actually holding us back more than anything. And the course will kind of go in there and do that. I found through the lessons, it will kind of say, okay, we're going to take this crutch from you and you're going to walk without it now. Like, you can do that, and you don't need to believe in using this external device just so that you can walk. And then I found once you learn that you are empowered, that the power does come from you, then you can look at tools like astrology, you look at tools like tarot, and you don't have to be completely through with them. You can still use them to help people, but you know that the power is inward, and then you can apply that for other people too.
Right. It's kind of like doing hard time in a material world. You know, when we are submersed in this reality, we feel compelled to, that inspiration, that concept of we can leave this, we can let go of this. Then you can't step out of it and just have the expectation that everybody's going to understand how to get there. You have to be willing to work with the current paradigm in order to vanish that paradigm. And that's what anybody who is working in any of the spiritual modalities, metaphysical modalities, they should be hooked into that, and they should be working on at least the principles of A Course in Miracles, even though they may not identify those principles as being the Course. You have to be present for the individual's liberation from the idea of being a victim of life.
Yeah, totally. That makes total sense. And it makes me think of the Byron Katie quote that, like, you can't kill your ego by, by opposing it or whatnot. That she said, I actually loved my ego to death. That kind of mentality of, like, no matter what we see in front of us, just emanating love towards it, and you can use these tools with an attitude of love. You can use astrology or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be your chair, or it could be your food, and you can apply love to whatever you see around you, which will help loosen up those attachments that we have to things here in the physical world.
Right. We never resist anything. What we do is, as you were stating, we vanish it by loving it. The more love we pour in to the darkest, deepest pits of hell, doesn't fight. Blackest is the darkest part of our soul is not real. And as soon as the light begins to enter in, the darkness flees, and the darkness has no depth or no anchor to stand on. So that really is, you know, the ultimate tenet we all have to be very, very much aware of in the ongoing process. You know, and kind of wrapping it up here, introduction to the final line to the final paragraph in the introduction, I think is very, very salient. It says, "Remember only this: you need not believe the others, need not accept them, and even welcome them. Some of them you may actively resist. None of this will matter, or allow yourself to make exceptions in applying the ideas the workbook contains. And whatever your reactions to the ideas may be, more than that required." Saying that when you start the process, when you actually commit to the journey, is going to have, or not going to begin, that alchemy, you know, and it's like turning lead into gold. It will eventually have the outcome that is desired, but you may not believe in it. You may have resistance to it. Damn.
Absolutely. Sorry, the video is breaking up a little, but absolutely. And so we'll go ahead and continue going over lessons 8 through 14 then next week. And if anyone wants to join us, we'd be pleased to have you. So this will be sort of our theme. We'll go 7 by 7 each week. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. And thanks for watching. Please consider stopping in next time.
Yes, absolutely. And anybody who's, you know, working with the lessons, if you have experiences that you'd like to share with us or try and gain a greater understanding around, definitely join with us next week, and we can talk about those things and have a lot of fun with our exploration of the workbook in A Course in Miracles.
Absolutely.
So,
thank you for meeting.